Hey, Prince Bosco here with another video about the history of video games. This is the final part, and this is going to be a pretty big part. 1987. Atari bought Federated Group to ensure that the Atari 7800 had a spot on shelves, but stores were still unsure of Atari, and so it did not go 100% to plan. Even though technically SMS was superior to the NES, it just didn't catch the attention of North America or Japan. Final Fantasy Begins and Metal Gear. 1988, the Action Pack was released on the NES, a pack of games that were really good, including Duck Hunt. With Sega's release of the Sega Genesis, the slogan is, Genesis does what 10 don't. Wow. Although Nintendo countered this with the release of Super Mario Bros. 3, which overshadowed it. Sega's downfall was not having a good relation to North America, having to use Tonka, but Tonka wasn't good, and so Sega searched for better. In the end, Sega made a branch in America to release the Genesis. Fourth generation of video games, 1988 to 1999. The 16-bit generation, as it's known, the generation sees the fall of Atari and the rise of Nintendo and Sega. Also, the new PlayStation rears its head. The fall of Atari, but it was like the freaking made first system. Well, you'll see what happens. It doesn't look too good with the Atari 7800, so. 1989, Atari sells Federated Group to Silla. Atari comes out with their first handheld, the Atari Lynx. It was the first colored handheld and had a nice design, but due to lack of parts, was understocked. And to their dismay, Nintendo released the groundbreaking Game Boy. The Game Boy destroyed Lynx and controlled the whole holiday season. Atari tried to sue Nintendo but lost the case. The first survival horror game is released, Sweet Home by Capcom. So Atari tries to give itself something, and it probably would have done okay, but Nintendo's like, nope, Game Boy. And just no. 1990, a PC war between Commodore and Amstrad rages in the background before finally Commodore releases the Commodore 64 game system, or the C64GS. But this C64GS flopped and was a failure. That's why you don't do that. Well, I guess Microsoft did. No, whatever. 1991, Nintendo releases the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or the Super NES. The Super NES had 16-bit graphics, but Sega had already beat them to it with the Genesis. Amstrad's response to Commodore was Amstrad GX4000. But like the C64GS, it failed as well. Computers? Microsoft is the only one who seems to be able to know what they're doing. The Sonic franchise is introduced. After the Super NES, Sega's slogan is now welcome to the next level. The Sega CD add-on was released for the Genesis. Nintendo tried to hire Sony to create an add-on for the NES, but due to arguments, they just disbanded them, which makes Sony want to join the industry, which could be Nintendo's downfall. Well, I guess it depends if you already know this part. 1992. The first FPS is released, Wolfenstein 3D. 1993. Atari struggles to hang on, and it is quickly falling under the race. Desperately, it releases the Atari Jaguar. Unfortunately, it sold poorly. Nintendo talks of another NES, but it is scrapped. But a new model of the NES is released. Ooh, that's not good for Atari. 3 fails in a row. That's strike 3, you're out. So if you're an Atari fan, this is bad news. 5th generation, 1993 to 2006. This generation saw the decline of Sega and the rise of PlayStation. Spoiler alert. With 32 and 64-bit in full force. This gen is most noted for 3D games and the transition from cartridges to CDs. But Nintendo's kind of old school. Watch this. 1994, and Nintendo states that this is the year of the cartridge to promote the Super NES and NES. Alright. Sega releases Sega 32X, but it got a poor reputation. It was said to be more of a second-gen console. That's 3 gens ago. That's pretty bad. Arcades begin to fall behind. Nintendo continues to promote the NES throughout the year, but A new boss was in town. Sony releases its first system, the PlayStation. The launch titles are Warhawk, Air Combat, Philosoma, Ridge Racer, and Rayman. The PlayStation does very well and distracts buyers from the NES's and Sega 32X. In fact, it is the highest selling console ever. Wow. Nintendo and Sega better step their game up. In 1995, Nintendo decides to step it up with the virtual reality and releases the Virtual Boy. Sounds pretty cool. The Virtual Boy was awful. It was hastened, and reports of people's eyes hurting didn't help. It was only on shelves for a year, but it was gone in video game history to be the worst system ever. Way to go, Nintendo. You got the best and the worst. But over at Sega, things were weren't looking good. They had just released Sega Saturn, which did quite well and competed against the NES's and the PlayStation good, but did have challenge with the Game Boy, and obviously destroyed the Virtual Boy. So it was okay. It definitely did not make up for Sega 32X at all. So, 1996, changes at Sega were happening. New people joining the team and others leaving, but it was changing for the worse. Yeah, you can always see the downfall. The Sega Saturn wasn't getting enough attention, and so people were starting to turn to PlayStation. Oh, yeah, see, Sony. Nintendo, you should not have done that to Sony. Nintendo had to do something fast. Meanwhile, Atari was falling out of the race. 3 years without an update left it in the dust. And with the new PlayStation Saturn, Atari had no chance. Atari merged with JT Incorporated, a short-lived hardware-making company. Atari soon faded from the video game market and into history. It's kind of sad. It lasted a while, but couldn't keep up, and it got 3 strikes, so yeah. It's kind of sad to see Atari fall like that after it was doing so good, but now it's time to look to the future. What is to come of Nintendo and Sega? Can they fight back against PlayStation? 1996, Nintendo launches its big seller, Nintendo 64. It offered revolutionary graphics and gameplay and used 64-bit to its extreme. Sony and Sega needed to seriously step their game up. PlayStation was actually pretty good competitor against Nintendo 64, but Sega didn't have too much against it at all. So, 1997, the Game Boy and Super NES are redesigned and better. That's all that happened that year. 1998, Game Boy Color is released. Sega has to catch up, and so it reveals its big system, the Dreamcast. Dreamcast was Sega's last chance. Nintendo 64 and PlayStation beating down the Saturn, Sega needed a big lead. The Dreamcast didn't do too good in Japan, but in America it hit record highs in sales. But that was an issue. Sega couldn't keep up with the demand. And even though it did good in North America, it failed in Japan, and that led to financial problems. Needing more, and not enough money to give more? Oh, I think that's 3 in a row. That was Sega's 3rd rotten system in a row. With Nintendo taking over sales and PlayStation 2 confirmed and on the way, Sega didn't have too much left to do. It's really kind of sad if you think about it. But the 6th generation, video games keep moving on regardless. 1998 to 2013. In this generation, we see Sega exit the scene. Spoiler alert. Nintendo fall behind and PlayStation reigns supreme in the beginning of Xbox. The actual computers actually did good. Microsoft, Commodore, and whatever the other one was, I don't remember, did not do that good. 1999, Sega desperately pumped out add-ons on the Dreamcast, and it was actually starting to work until Nintendo stated that the next system was the GameCube, and the PlayStation 2 will have even better internet availability. Yikes. 2000, the turn of the century started with the PlayStation 2, or the PS2. The PS2 did very good and nailed the coffin shut on Sega. It's just like Atari all over again. 2001, Sega discontinues the Dreamcast and leaves the hardware industry. But it's not out of the video game industry. Sega now turns to software. Nintendo introduces the redesigned Game Boy Advance. Also, they launched the GameCube, which has decent sales. Microsoft pulls into the race with the Xbox, almost like a distant sequel to the Dreamcast. That's what some people think, like Microsoft took over Sega, which probably not that far off. Microsoft pulls in the lead. It was now a 4-way competition between Xbox, PlayStation 2, GameCube, and Dreamcast. although Dreamcast isn't too much of a worry because it's discontinued, so. Mobile games start to become an idea. Like mobiles and like phones. 2002, Xbox creates Xbox Live, which makes online gaming easy and fun. Xbox excels where Sony and Nintendo are attempting to do. 2003, Nintendo once again redesigns the Game Boy and creates the Game Boy Advance SP. Mobile games are starting a major amount of attention. Alright, so Sega falls, but Sony rises. It's the way the industry works. Now it's time to see Nintendo and Sony move on and continue forwards as Microsoft hops on. 7th generation, 2004 to present. We see Xbox step in, but not too much. Nintendo goes for lower technology and more features and quality for casual gamers, while Sony goes for top stats but for veteran gamers. Also, motion control and touchscreen jump onto the scene. 2004, a slim version of the PS2 is released. Nintendo releases a groundbreaking handheld, the DS. The DS, or double screen, has 2 screens and the bottom is touchscreen. This is the first video game system to utilize the touchscreen well, but Sony is always on top of everything. Sony released its first handheld, PlayStation Portable or PSP. Both the PSP and DS had great success and rivaled each other perfectly. 2005, Nintendo's last Game Boy remake, the Game Boy Micro, is released. Microsoft launches the next Xbox 360. The Xbox 360 was a smashing hit and stepped over GameCube and PlayStation 2. Wired controllers were a thing of the past, but without a handheld to Xbox name, the handheld market was filled with Nintendo and Sony. 2006, Nintendo releases the DS Lite, a later DS. New Super Mario Bros. Topped the sales chart. Nintendo and Sony bring out their 2 big projects. Nintendo launches the Wii while Sony launches PlayStation 3. The two can keep up with the Xbox. With the release of the PS3, people literally died for it. There was shooting and stuff, and that delayed the release in Europe. The Wii sold out all over, and Nintendo needed to make much more. The Wii shaped consoles for the future. Yep. 2007, the iPhone was hugely revolved around the aspect of mobile gaming. A new version of the PSP called the PSP 2000 was released and did very well. 2008, Nintendo released a DSi, which had 2 cameras, internet, and DSiWare. It was a big hit. Another PSP version was the PSP 3000, which added a microphone. Yay. Nokia and Apple have a huge supply of mobile games in their stores. 2009, Sony's PSP Go was released. It was easier to carry around, but was criticized for being so expensive. The PS3 is made slimmer. 2010, Nintendo released the DS XL and DSi XL, the larger version of the DS and DSi. We see the rise of casual gaming and motion control. It's mainly Sony versus Xbox who have similar traits, but Nintendo goes at it by a different approach. People may call Nintendo for children, but it's actually more casual and focuses more on fun than skill. It's true. Eighth generation, 2011 to present. Nintendo starts off this generation with the Wii U and 3DS, showing off touchscreen and 3D. Nintendo gets a little more mature. Sony and Xbox have the battle of the decade with PlayStation 4 versus Xbox One, although Sony's still working on handheld while Xbox doesn't. Yeah, I don't know why Xbox doesn't have a handheld. In 2011, Nintendo releases 3DS, a complete remake of the DS. Still with double screen, but now with no glasses 3D. The 3DS was a huge hit and is practically a moneymaker. Sony redoes the PSP again with the PSP E1000 model. It's basically just slimmer. But the PlayStation Vita also comes out, but doesn't do too much to alter 3DS sales. We're getting pretty close to now. 2012, Nintendo released the sequel to the Wii, the Wii U. The Wii U uses a touchscreen controller, and this completely revolutionizes games. But third-party developers have a hard time making games to fit it. With Sony and Xbox getting ready to reveal their new top systems, the Wii U needs to stick out. 3DS XL does very well. So right now it seems like Nintendo is like dominating the handheld market, while Sony and Xbox have these big systems, which is like right now basically. So you know, 2013, Sony's PlayStation 4 and Microsoft's Xbox One start out similar. Both encounter problems with broken systems, but recover quickly. It's a stalemate with the It's a stalemate, but with the Wii U falling behind, with the 3DS dominating the handheld market. The 2DS is released. So that is all the way up to now. Nothing really happened in 2014 so far. But that is the history of video games. We started way back in 1644, and we're here now. But the future of gaming. Hopefully, virtual reality become better and not like the Virtual Boy, which was a complete disaster. Hopefully, the Wii U will get more credit for what it actually is, and Nintendo will be able to catch up in the console section. PlayStation 4 and Xbox One are still at a stalemate. Everyone's debating which one's better, but you don't exactly have an exact amount better, and it's kind of equal. So, yeah, they're rivaling each other pretty well, with Nintendo sneaking under the radar. So, this kind of helps us think of what's going to be coming up next. It's basically a race. Who can upgrade their system the best, and who can have the best graphics, best games? It's just a race, and if you don't put out a satisfactory system with not satisfactory games, you will fall behind quickly. And that's basically what happened to Atari and Sega. Hopefully there'll be, I doubt it'll be a video game crash like the 1983 one, so I guess, yeah. But it's obvious to see how 1983 had to crash due to the fact there were so many people making games, but now there's only Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo, but it doesn't mean more can't join. But anything's possible in the world of the video game industry. So, hope you learned some stuff about what's going on. And until next time, see ya. Stay awesome.